the MVP Action Grant, the Winnetuxet River Corridor Assessment Project, which I'm really excited about. And I just wanted to go around, make some introductions so I know you all, and I'll introduce you and my team too. So if you want to start, kind of Linda, if you want to start, and then just go around.
Okay, I'm Linda Letty. I'm on both Open Space Committee and Conservation Commission.
All right, folks, don't be shy.
Jump in.
Okay. Vicki Alberti, Open Space Committee, co-chair with Linda.
I'm Dave Alberti, right next door here at with Bylaw Review Committee, and listening in for ZBA, so I can pass some good news
Hey,
on
bylaw
them.
review. Yeah, bylaw review will be great. It'd be great to have you on, Dave.
Yeah, that'll be good. That's and Alan Wheelock may join us hopefully too, a chair of Bylaw Review.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
We had to cancel. Okay.
he had to cancel, yeah. And Dave's on Zoning Board of Appeals too, as does Colleen. So we have that too.
All right,
Okay.
who's next?
Colleen,
Oh, hi, Colleen Thompson, ZBA, Town Properties Committee, Council on Aging.
and former selectman, so she knows the inside story of everything. Susan,
Susan Ossoff, I'm on the Open Space Committee and CPC right now.
and former chairman of the Finance Committee, so she knows all the ins and outs of those secrets. Mark,
Chair, Board of Selectmen, Chair, Community Preservation Committee.
and Rick, you're there somewhere.
Yep, Rick Burnett, CPC, Conservation, Ag Commission.
Yep. Most of us have more than one thing.
Yeah,
Jane,
Jane Schultz, Open Space Committee, CPC, Historical Commission.
Brian,
I'm the conservation agent and helper wherever I need to be used, basically.
yeah, he's getting more and more involved in this kind of the rest of open space projects, which was what MVP is, as well as the zoning thing we're doing and stuff like that. So we have a few people missing from either open space, and especially Alan Wheelock, who's chair of the bylaw committee, and a guy from the planning board named John Schmidt, who is really interested in this, but he just happens to be away this week, and maybe one other member board of the board, and someone from the health Board of Health as well. So we ended up with I forget, 15 or 16 people and 11 committees. So I think it's a pretty good representation.
yeah, that's fabulous. I honestly, I've been working here at SERPED. I'm not your regional planner, your regional environmental planner, but I do work over boundaries through my affiliations. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. But I don't think I've ever seen a steering committee that has so much diversity and background and ties to everything that's going on in the community. It's really impressive. So I'm Bill Napolitano. I'm with SERPED. I'm the environmental program director here at Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. We go right up to the border with Plympton. We have Carver is our last town next to you, your neighbor, and Middleborough. And we have 27 cities and towns, but I do a lot of work with OCPC, which is your regional planning agency. And we're actually going to partner in this venture down the road too. And I have Karen, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Karen Porter. I work with Bill at SERPED. Essentially, I'm the IT manager and a GIS specialist there, and well, whatever else they need me to do, I'm happy to jump in. So tonight, I'm helping Bill with the presentation and running Zoom tonight.
Great.
Nice to meet you all.
All right, Karen's going to be doing the driving.
Yeah.
All right, so I wanted to start off with Linda's actually, now you can go back, Karen, put up the first part of the PowerPoint if you want, but I wanted Linda to kind of introduce the project to let you guys know how I got involved. You know, what's this guy from SERPED doing here?
He needs you.
The better question is, how do you think you'll ever get away? And the answer is never. But this I'll start on a big picture, sort of the state of Massachusetts through the Executive Office of Environmental and Economic Affairs. About 10 years ago, starting being very conscious of that climate change was coming. and that the state needed to develop new initiatives, new policies, new understanding of what the impacts would be economically and environmentally on the state. So they started doing a lot of initiatives, and around, I don't know, Bill will tell, about 4 years ago, one of the big initiatives to come out of it was that they realized that this business called resilience, which we'll be talking about, you know, how do you maintain the quality of the natural systems you have now that provide all the natural services like flood protection and water quality and carbon sequestration and all that stuff that they call natural infrastructure. How do you maintain all that? Well, you can do it through your municipalities. And so how do they motivate municipalities and help them to analyze what they have in their town and then get the, you know, identify the priorities and start getting some resources to save them? It's a better way to do it in terms of saving money in the future, and it's also more effective in terms of protecting the environment. So the MVP program started, this is maybe its 4th year, something like that, Bill?
Yep.
And every town, they want every town in, and I think Plympton ended up going in on, I think it was the 2nd round, and we had to do a year-long study, which we did with a consultant firm called Beta. And every board in town was asked to analyze what they were worried about. And they had a group meeting at the end that we all analyzed that. And a report came out, and that report was turned in, and it was accepted just really this past March. But we knew that we were interested in pursuing some of the priorities that had been identified in the report, because each town was allowed to have 5. And the top of our priorities here in town was to maintain the watershed in the Winnetuxet area, because it's so important in terms of all the natural qualities I just talked about. It's one of the 3 most important in the South Shore and one of the top 20% in the state. So we knew we had something valuable, and we knew it was a benefit to the town and to the state, but we didn't know what to do about it. And we knew it would take experts, and there's no way we would ever be able to do anything about it. And so luckily, when we were going through that study and realized that the action grants were coming up, and we saw that we knew Serped had been leading a very active Taunton River watershed assessment with all those other 27 towns for the last several years. So we knew there was a lot of expertise there, and Bill is the head of the environment program over at Serped, has been for years, and he knows so much just in his sleep that he can talk about and get things going. So we did ask Bill to come over and talk with us and see if there's a way that we could work with Serped, because the places they're working in the Winnetuxet River, that's part of the Taunton River watershed, and that's who we needed to be with. And to our great good fortune, Bill agreed to take us on and worked with us, but he wrote with his colleagues that we'll hear from later. He wrote the action grant application, and it's superb, and I think you all have copies, and we got it funded in the late summer or fall, whatever it is. And we are in part 1 of an action grant that will be completed by, say, July 1st. And it lets us assess what assets we have here in town, so that if we think it's appropriate, we can compete for part 2 of an action grant, which is actually funds to preserve or protect some of the critical aspects that we want, that we think are most critical to perpetuating our resilience or our natural infrastructure. So we are just starting, and tonight, the reason we're all here and the other ones is that we're the steering committee for this project. And over the next 6 months or so, as we'll hear, Bill and his team have outlined presentations. They're going to be giving us this incredible presentations and information so that we can begin sorting out with them what would be the best thing to do to preserve the most important aspects of Plympton going forward. And that'll be our challenge over the next 6 or 7 months. So our job is to listen and analyze and ask questions. And they're doing all the hard work. The people you see listed here, they're doing all the analysis. They've come with the data. They have recommendations. They know what we should be thinking about. So we're in incredibly good hands. And we're going to hear about tonight from Bill. I think we're getting a top-down view of what this whole project's about and where it can take us. So it's very exciting. It's an incredibly lucky thing for Plympton to have this capacity brought to us. So it's really wonderful. So anyhow, thank you all for being part of the steering committee, and thank you, Bill, especially for writing that incredible grant application and taking us on a first step on this thing.
Well, I'll tell you, it's my pleasure. And I was thrilled actually when you called me. Like Linda said, I work with the Taunton River Stewardship Council and a group called the Resilient Taunton Watershed Network. And if you look at the first page of the PowerPoint here, this is basically the group that I am going to be working with and the group that is going to be working not only for you, but with you. One of the things about the Resilient Taunton Watershed Network, and I'll explain the group in a minute, is that our mantra really is we're here to plan with you, not at you. You guys are driving the bus. And when we go into an area to plan, our strategy is to plan like we live there. Like this is our town and we come home, we leave it every morning, come home to it every night. So it has to be a plan that works for all of us, but particularly for you. And Linda's right. I probably will never leave the area. In fact, I'm your neighbor. I live in Kingston. So I drive through Plympton every day. And since I've been involved in this project, I take as many different routes as I possibly can to get to Taunton. Sometimes it takes me a little longer, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm the only one working in the office right now anyways, because we're all working remotely. So I'm having more fun than a grown man should have, actually. But this is my team. And some of these guys you'll know. Eric Wahlberg has worked with you before doing some forestry assessment. He's with Manomet. Neil Williams is an applied forest scientist with Manomet. He's new to the area, but Neil is absolutely fabulous. He's a climate resilience forester. That's his specialty. Sarah Burns is a water resource scientist with the Nature Conservancy. And by luck of God, we got Maria Gabriel. She works with conservation projects at TNC, but Maria's career was spent with the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program. So she knows pretty much everything that's out there on the ground. Danica Williams is a climate resilience coordinator with Mass Audubon. And that's why I was so excited to hear about the bylaw review committee before, because Danica actually teaches towns how to go through the Mass Audubon bylaw review process to see if what you have on your books will enable you to do what you want to do in the long run. And then there's me, Helen Sienkiewicz, who's my assistant director and just my co-director. She'll be working with me at Serpid. We're going to set up a project page, coordinate our team. In fact, what we'll try to do is probably go through Linda and Liz as the local contacts to make sure we get everything that we need for you. And Helen and I will be the contacts for our team. And then Courtney Rocha is the Southeast Regional Coordinator for the MVP program. And Courtney has been absolutely great. She loves this project. She plans to sit in on the meetings when she can. She couldn't make it tonight, but this is the team. And we're working for you and with you. Next slide. Karen, okay, next slide. Thank you. All right. This is the Resilient Taunton Watershed Network. Linda referred to it too. We came together about 6 years ago, Bridgewater State, big meeting, because we found that we were working all over the Southeast, sometimes on similar projects. So we'd cross paths regularly. Sometimes we were in partnership efforts. Sometimes, again, we didn't want to duplicate effort. We didn't want to bump into each other. We didn't want to cause train wrecks or car crashes. So we sat down, we said, what can we do cooperatively to help better serve Southeastern Massachusetts and the Taunton River watershed in particular, the 43 cities and towns that make up the watershed. So right now, this is the membership. If you look at it, it's pretty amazing. And the people I work with are absolutely amazing and totally committed to this. What we do is we go out and work with cities and towns, pursue grants, provide educational materials and services for them. There is no base money. We get together, and for the last 6 years, we have committed to meeting monthly. Sometimes it used to be conference calls and in-person meetings. Now it's mostly Zoom. We spend a lot of time in the Zoomiverse, but we're looking forward to having in-person meetings again, hopefully again in 2021. But we have never met less than monthly, and sometimes we'll meet 2 or 3 times a month, depending on the projects or what we have pending. Next slide. And this is what we do. We tried, Linda referred to resilience before. We're really into trying to help communities build resilience, a resilient watershed, that can adjust to stresses and things. You always hear a resilient community can bounce back. Well, now you're hearing a lot of bounce ahead. Get up and keep moving forward. We're a resource for resilience. Like I said, we meet monthly. And we do provide education and resources to local officials and residents of the watershed. We do have a webpage also with materials on it that's available to anybody. And I'm going to make sure that you guys have all the contacts, all our web pages, your project page, and the whole bit. Next slide. So one of the big things, and you probably heard about it when you were doing your MVP consultation with Beta, obviously vulnerabilities based on potential climate change impacts that we think we're going to be suffering through. To a lot of people, climate change is fairly new, but one of the things I like to emphasize when I talk about climate change is the fact that we've been through a lot and lived through a lot for generations. So when I present data to my MVP groups, I usually start out with the first measured occurrences. And the next slide will show you what I'm talking about. I always say, this is what we've lived through as families, as generations, as a society. Since 1895, the temperature, the average temperature here in the Northeast has gone up 2.9 degrees Fahrenheit. And in some areas, we're blessed with geographic locations, 3.3 degrees. The growing season, there's a lot of agriculture in Plympton, a lot of my communities, a lot of agriculture, and I get a chance to work with and talk to a lot of farmers. The growing season has increased since 1950 by 15 days. One of the things about this that's really amazing is when I started doing this back in 2014, the data said 10 days. In 2016, it said 11 days. Now it's 15 days. Sea level rise, not going to affect you, but we are on the Taunton River. Taunton River is part of an estuary, so tidal surge you get. But sea level rise is 11 inches since 1922 in Boston, about a foot to 10 inches, Providence down the Cape. And heavy precipitation, that means the volume of precipitation that we get in a storm event has increased 55% since 1958. Next slide. And these are Massachusetts climate changes just projected by the 2090s if we keep on the course we're doing, if we don't do anything. Temperature could go up 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit. These are extremes. We have about 34 more days and 90-degree temperatures. Sea level rise, and this is really extreme, 4 feet to 10.2 feet. Most people say realistically 4 to 6 feet probably. But the number of two-inch precipitation days is looking like it's going to increase by about 47%, which is amazing. And what we have a tendency to kind of fall into now is like flash storms, flash flooding, and what they're even now calling flash droughts, the way the drought cycle has run the last couple of years. Next slide. This slide everybody loved when I first showed it because they only looked at the top part. They say, hey, more warm winter days, less heating oil, less energy, the whole bit. This is beautiful. Yeah, well, it's going to be a decrease of about 26.2% in what we need as far as heating demand. But the flip side of this is it's going to be warmer in the summer. So you have a 178% increase in what you need to cool buildings or cool yourselves or shaded areas or sheltered areas. So next slide. And extreme heat in Massachusetts. This is current and just projected by mid-century. This is why I think people are so eager to start hopping on these things, make changes, promote resiliency locally, change our practices. Plus or minus 15 degrees, 90 degrees, or 15 days, 90 degrees right now. Could be 30 to 40 by mid-century. 95-degree days, you think, well, that's not that much more, but yeah, those few degrees really add up. Plus or minus 5 right now, 3 to 9 days by mid-century. And 100-degree days, I mean, we have 1 or fewer right now, but 1 to 5 could make a real significant difference in what we have to do and how we have to address things, especially providing shelter, vulnerable populations, cooling stations, water. Next slide. And this one's really, a lot of people don't realize the change in heavy precipitation in the country, the patterns, we are far and away the winners there too. These are, again, those torrential storms, storms by volume and increase, 74%. Next slide. This is troubling. I'm sure you guys all had to deal with it. It seems everybody I know has had to deal with, ticks, Lyme disease, mosquito-borne disease, vector-borne diseases. This is a 2015 map. When I first saw this map in 2010, there were actually some white areas in New England. And if you look at this 2015 map, there's a little bit of blue and a little bit of white up there in New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine. The newest map that I just saw, New England's totally red. And I actually get a lot of calls in my office about people saying in the middle of winter last year, they were still pulling ticks off their animals and pulling ticks off themselves as they were walking through the woods. Next slide. So what Linda was talking about before is we're really trying to integrate climate resiliency and preservation of our green infrastructure into how we prioritize open space acquisition. I know Plympton, I read your open space plan, I've read your MVP plan, most of the documents that are out there. And I think you guys have done a great job really expressing what you want to do, why you want to acquire land, the type of land you want to acquire. And one of the things I tell communities too, if you're looking to increase your resiliency, or at least retain your community resiliency, you have to look at open space as almost part of your retirement portfolio. It's not just for walks in the woods, canoeing and kayaking, you know, nature photography, things like that anymore. It's how it functions as well. What does it do? What services does it provide? How does it make our community more resilient to floods, to heat, to whatever climate-related impacts that we may experience now and in the future? So that's what we're going to try to do with this project. Next slide. And some of the examples of the strategies we're going to be looking at, and again, Linda identified a few of them. We're going to look at identifying and protecting vulnerable areas containing critical green infrastructure and habitat, your forests, your wetlands, your waterways, your soils. Soils are so important. Restoring natural river function and processes, and where we can, reclaim and enhance floodplain. Protect the areas of productive and carbon critical soils. And repurposing portions of the built environment, maybe things that don't function the way they used to. You know, reclaim floodplain, reclaim wetlands, things like that, nature-based solutions where we can actually repurpose things. But the biggest thing, and this is why I told you, you drive the bus, and it's what you said. How can we do this and retain the consistency with our community plans? What have we said, meaning what have you put in your plans about protecting land in Plympton and how we do it? And I'll tell you, 30 years ago, I actually helped write your first open space plan. And I was working with people. It's so funny how history, you know, runs in cycles. I was working with a woman named Janice Burton, who was the director of the Manomet Bird Observatory at the time. Manomet's come a long way. They're international, you know, climate specialists there now too. But a lot of what you said 30 years ago, because I still have that plan on my shelf, is still part of what you want today. Your community character is important. What you do in your community is important. How you do it. The types of land that you hold near and dear. I mean, it's all there. Next slide. So like I said, I've read your documents and I've actually pulled some things out, and I've put these things in your grant too, because I was so impressed when I wrote, you know, when I was writing the grant for the MVP program. You know, protection of significant parcels of the biomap and critical landscape and core habitat areas. And these are the things that people on our team, the Nature Conservancy, they helped work with the state to put these things into those plans, the biomap plan for Plympton. And people like Maria Gabriel, who worked for Natural Heritage Endangered Species, was working on the other end of it. Protect and preserve Plympton's natural resources, including water, unique wildlife, habitats, you know, for the benefits of present and future generations, yeah. And you look into the Taunton River watershed area of the town, and that's a significant portion of the town. And one of the things about that significant portion of the town is it's a featured study area in the Wild and Scenic River Corridor with the federal government. So there's a lot of importance with a lot of folks and potentially a lot of resources for the town to use. Next slide. These are some more things from your open space plan. Identify the high priority lands for acquisition, easements, restrictions, however we want to do it. I heard before it would be great not to have to pay for it. There are ways to do that too. Evaluate and update Plympton's current watershed protection districts. And I know you've done a study with Peter Newton before about future potential water supplies in Plympton. And I actually had given Peter some information on that when he was doing the study. So we have that in the back of our minds too, looking at this. And based on the biomap too, protect the unique habitats and natural communities. We're going to look at that, plant animal species. Obviously, what's going on out there on the ground is going to dictate the types of recommendations we make. And promote the adoption of updated planning and zoning bylaws. And this is where we're running this project in parallel with something I believe is going on with Old Colony Planning, our sister agency. They're working on natural resource protection zoning with the town right now through their DLTA program. And hopefully we're going to bring them into the mix in the late spring when we talk about the bylaw workshop, bylaw evaluation workshop. So we've got everything, trying to get everything on the radar. What makes this area so important, the Winnetuxet River Watershed Study Area? Obviously, for the important resources that we've all been talking about. But here's a fact a lot of people didn't know, and I brought this up to a bunch of people that were surprised. Between 2012 and 2017, Plympton had the 5th highest rate of development by percentage of land converted, which means just land conversion, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And our friends in Mass Audubon put out 5-year studies called Losing Ground. And that was in their latest volume, the 2020 issue. And then obviously contains some of the most significant intact habitat and wildlife corridors in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You know, like Linda alluded to before, it's probably one of the 4 or 5 top areas in the Commonwealth, definitely in this part of the Commonwealth. Next slide. So what do we want to do? We want to address your plans. I said it's our plans here, but it's your plans. Your MVP plan, your open space plan, other plans that we've been able to dig up by preserving the green infrastructure, preserving critical habitat, preserving healthy and productive soils, and reviewing our local regulations to make sure, and this is the most important part, that we're promoting our land use goals and accommodating the nature-based solutions that we'd like to pursue. I mean, if you have the best intents in mind, but you go back in and dive into your bylaws, or someone comes to town and dives into your bylaws and said, hey, I'd love to work with you, but this is what your bylaws or your planning board rules and regulations say I have to do. Well, it's not going to work. So we're going to try to see if we can nip some of that in the bud. Next slide. So what is green infrastructure? This is the classic definition: a network of waterways, wetlands, woodlands, wildlife habitat, and other natural areas that support native species, maintain natural ecological processes, sustain air, water resources, and contribute to the health and quality of life. That's about everything in a nutshell. Now, next slide. Types of green infrastructure features: undeveloped riparian corridors, riverbank, wetlands adjacent to rivers, a mix of wetland and upland features, wetland complexes, and forested upland. And that's pretty much what you find in the Winnetuxet River corridor in the undisturbed land. Green infrastructure solutions, you got to look at strategic protection, restoration, natural features. And these are just some of the ways you do it. Obviously limit new development, flood-prone areas. You definitely don't want to do that. Maximize groundwater recharge, especially in Plympton. Like I said, you've done a study on that. Maintain ecological viability. And again, maintain a high quality of life for folks. Next. So this is where my friend, not my whole team isn't with me tonight. Being the holidays, everybody's wherever they are, but this is where Eric Wahlberg and Neil Williams have been working. But the Manamet Green Infrastructure Network mapping for the Taunton River Watershed began in 2014, 2015 with a grant that we went out and chased from the EPA to kind of give people in the Taunton River Watershed an idea of the resources that they had. So this is the basic land use map for the Taunton River Watershed. This is what Eric and Jen Schocken, who was there at the time, she's since gone to work for New England Forestry Foundation. And like I said, Neil Williams is in there replacing her. Next slide. So we took that and looked at it. And one of the things we wanted the Green Infrastructure Network to focus on is resilience, retention of habitat, and look at surface water protection, especially groundwater protection. Obviously is going to be a byproduct of habitat. Next. So we started off with the resilient landscape, and this came from our friends at the Nature Conservancy. They helped the state map this when they were putting together the biomap reports for each one of the towns, and they've updated since. So the block will tell you which types of resilient landscapes or how they're rated. They're out there. The most important, the highest and slightly above average are going to be the darkest green and then the pale green. And keep your eye focused on where you guys are over there on the right-hand side of the map. If you're facing the screen, way out on the tip, that's going to be Plympton right there. Yep, thanks, Karen. Next to Kingston, Carver, and Middleborough, Halifax. Okay, next slide. So we started out with TNC's base map. And then what Eric and Jen did, was they pulled out the above average and slightly above average habitat areas, resilience blocks. Next slide. So that's the first component of our green infrastructure map. We have areas of above average resilience. Next slide. Then they went to your biomap core and critical natural landscape. And again, this is work that the Nature Conservancy did with the Natural Heritage Program. And focus on your area of the world. Look at Plympton. This is Biomap 2 critical habitat. You guys are almost all green in that Taunton River portion of the watershed. And that's right there in your Winnetuxet River corridor. All right, next slide. So that's the second element of our green infrastructure network map. Next slide. Next, we look at surface water, wetlands, and flood-prone areas. And a lot of this data was derived, again, from the state, FEMA, resilientmass.org, which is what a lot of your consultants use when they're doing your MVP plans. So we put that on the map. Right, next slide. And then we looked at riparian flood zones and buffers. And that's your green map. That's your green in there along with the blue. And again, look at your corner of the world over there in Plympton. Next slide. So that's your third component. Next slide. So when we layered everything, this is what the map of the Taunton River watershed looked like as far as the green infrastructure network components go. Now you go look at those large clusters of green, dark green and bright green. Over in your corner of the world, there's a very large one. In the southeast, there's a very large one, but it's going to be a distinct difference in the next map. Here we're looking at the Taunton River watershed. 44% of the watershed, we figured out when we did the analysis, is within the green infrastructure network, which is a huge portion of the watershed. Tells us that a lot of it's probably undeveloped. Next slide. And 66% of the green infrastructure network is currently undeveloped and unprotected. Now look at your little corner of the world over there. That's that corridor that Linda was referring to before. That is one of the largest intact corridors in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And much of it resides right in Plympton, some in Middleborough, some in Halifax. But it's contiguous, it's intact. It's currently undeveloped and unprotected. Next slide. And this represents 30% of the entire watershed. Now, when you look at this map, a lot of the larger areas went away because they may be protected. They may be in state, local, whatever, possession. Now look at Plympton, right up to the watershed line. That's where the Winnetuxet comes in. And look at how much green you got to the other side, even with your neighbors. At Carver, Middleborough, Halifax, but that's a huge amount of green infrastructure that helps retain the resiliency of that portion of the Taunton River watershed. Provides climate, climate impact change, protection, resiliency, habitat connectivity, everything we were talking about before. So these are the types of maps that we're going to be working off of when we do your forestry and resilience assessment in this area of the watershed. But you can see how prominent it is. You guys have a lot going on there, and that's why it is so critically important. Next slide. So that's Manomet's stuff. And then we're going to be coming in again. We work together as a team, but this is where Helen and I are probably going to be coming in and look at the soils. And one of the big things we do whenever we go into communities, we work with a lot of agricultural communities. We work with CMAP a lot. We use the USDA definition of soil health because it's so important to realize why healthy soils are so important. Soil health is defined, again, by the USDA and the NRCS as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem. It's its own ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. And this is really what provides foundation for all the work we do here at Serpent. You really have to treat the soil as an ecosystem in the context of the ecosystem that it underlies, that large green swath that we just showed you. That's all on top of soil. Next slide. And my diagram isn't as pretty as Eric's, but this will kind of get you to what we're looking at when we try to do a soils analysis. You look at the threats to soil, obviously, erosion, contamination, sealing, which, doesn't allow the soil to function the way it should, compaction, biodiversity loss, which means you lose your critters and organisms below the ground, as well as what the impact could be above the ground. And obviously landslides and floods. Now landslides probably not, but you go back to erosion, but floods definitely. And you look at how soil functions. These are bundles of things that soils do, soils processes. It's habitat provision for the little things and the big things. I always say when you lose the little things, you really have to worry when you don't have the bugs in the soil anymore. Cycling of elements through the soil, looking at decomposition of material into soil, soil structure maintenance, which is all part of it, a biological population, what lives in the soil and regulation of it, water cycling, infiltration, filtration, retention, and organic matter, the humus, and it tries things that break down, that enrich the soil, keep the soil living, keep that ecosystem functioning the way it should. So we're going to look at the soil-based ecosystem services, biomass production, biodiversity conversion, or conservation, erosion control, pest and disease control, which is critically important, water quality and water supply, and climate regulation. Everything that springs out of the soils, everything that's above ground springs out of your soils. And it's going to vary from place to place. A lot of people say, well, in a river corridor, you get a lot of wetlands, a lot of riverbank, watering vegetation, the whole bit. What's great about the soil? What's great about the soil is it functions in that ecosystem. It serves a purpose in that ecosystem. It allows that ecosystem to be healthy and helps you retain that ecosystem. And we have to realize the uniqueness of each one of these areas and what they do and what they provide. Next slide. So as far as healthy soils functions, again, these are some of the things we're going to be looking at. It was on the last slide. Carbon sequestration is another big one too. And one of the things that we want to do here, and it's in your grant, and I've already contacted people from the State Healthy Soils Plan, State Healthy Soils Action Plan, Jim Newman. We're going to be getting them to come down and give a special presentation on the State Healthy Soils Action Plan and carbon critical soils, so that we really understand what we have and how we have to work to maintain these unique ecosystems. So it's going to be kind of a value-added presentation. But I've already contacted folks from the Division of Ecological Restoration, the Cranberry Bog Restoration Program, and State Healthy Soils Action Plan, and they've committed to come down and give us special sessions. So we'll probably work Jim into this one. Next slide. The next one's going to be the Nature Conservancy is going to come in. They've developed a tool to help map nature-based solutions for climate resilience. Obviously, they did the resiliency blocks for the Biomap too, so this is their area of expertise. And TNC's tool can help provide guidance for the implementation of nature-based solutions by looking at how inland flood, coastal flood, obviously not applicable here, and drought hazards overlap with opportunities to apply nature-based solutions to the environment. Next slide. And this is pretty much the graphic. They have mapping goals, and the mapping of nature-based solution opportunities for adaptation is the principal goal. And some of the hazards they look at, or they're going to be looking at, obviously here, inland flooding and drought impacts. They're going to be huge. And then they're going to be looking at opportunities for conservation, restoration, and management. And the third one is really a key. We always talk about let's conserve it, but let's restore it. But if we don't manage it properly, either physically or through our bylaws, rules, and regulations, then we have no net gain. Next slide. And this is one of the big things that, I work with Sarah. I've worked with Sarah Burns for years. Nature-based solutions and low-impact development are actions or strategies that conserve, restore, and or manage, or help to manage our green infrastructure. So this is really important. And when we do our evaluation, these are the kind of things we're going to be looking at, the opportunities here in Plympton and within the corridor. Next slide. So then we come to our friends at Mass Audubon, and they've developed that bylaw review tool I was telling you about before. And one of the great things is we're coming off a project where we just worked with small towns, and you guys probably know them all. In the lower part of the Taunton River estuary, we worked with Berkeley, Freetown, and Dighton to go over some of their bylaws, because we were doing the green infrastructure mapping with them as well. And they wanted to see what they could do better, and how they could do the same thing you guys are trying to do, meet the goals and objectives of your planning documents, become more resilient, and retain the land that they should retain. So the big thing is you start off with the questions, the two basic questions. Why? Are your resilience goals reflected in your bylaws? And if so, how? And if not, what are the barriers to those goals? Sometimes it's as simple as that. What barriers have we put up to achieving our goals? And then how? They're going, Danica is going to teach you how to review your existing bylaws, identify conventional and best practices, develop informed recommendations, and identify administrative versus town meeting changes. And that's really important. There's some things you can do without having to go to town meeting. But Danica teaching you how to use the tool is going to be really important. And once you learn how to use it, you'll be able to use it forever and apply it to just about anything that you bring before any board. Next. And this is an example of a chart on the tool. I'm not going to run down, but I'll just let you look at it. It's prioritized from, conventional to better to best. And that's the way she's going to teach you to look at your bylaws and see what's in each one of them, or the ones that we want to look at that are related to this project that would have a, profound impact on what we're doing here. Next. And the basic premise there is that the way that we plan and zone is really going to help determine how we grow and how resilient we are as a community when we come out of it. That's the bottom line. We can grow the way we want to. And this is the project. Again, it's planning with you. Circle back. We've set this agenda. We're going to have 4 to 5 monthly meetings. Hopefully, we can meet as a steering committee. I don't know, it'll be up to you guys when you want to meet, what's most convenient for you, because everything that we're going to do during the month, the workshops that we're going to present and the special topic meetings that we're going to present, we're going to run by you first. We're going to put it out there for the public. We're going to put everything up on the project page. So you guys will have a say in everything that we do. We're going to do data collection, and synthesis is going to go on continually throughout the project. I know Eric and Neil have been out in the woods already looking at the trees and the forest and the health of the forest. I've been out there tramping around looking at some of the soils, the riverbank, the whole bit. I think Maria's probably going to get out there and visit that, the habitat areas. So there'll be a bunch of us just kind of bopping around the town, but that'll go on regularly. And if we call you, we may ask for some assistance. Get some of the study committee members out there, the steering committee members, see what we can do, how we can do it. Or if you can give us what I call simple truths and profound clues, where should we be looking? What do we need? And then the bylaw review and training, like I said, Danica is going to train you on how to use that Mass Audubon tool. And Sarah Burns and Maria Gabriel are going to train you on how to use the Nature Conservancy tool for nature-based solutions and evaluation. And then when we're done with everything, we're gonna write it up, make some recommendations. And again, everything is run by you before we submit it to anybody at the state. Once we submit it and it's accepted, what we'd like to do is come up with some recommendations. We're also gonna look for resources. How can we acquire this land? Who can we work with? Maybe, I heard you guys before we got into the meeting about donations, good conservation easements, restrictions, maybe even conversion of land. Some of the program people we have coming in may have some great ideas. And that'll be the gist of it. And we're also going to have a project page. I'll make sure that you all get this link and we'll put it out there for the public that you can go to at any point in time and look at any documents that we have up there, any maps that we have up there, any resources that we have up there. It's your project page. And all the materials and resources that we have up there are going to be open to you. These meetings are going to be recorded. They'll be up there. So if people miss them, they'll be able to, you know, listen to them at their leisure. All of the presentations will be up there as well. And one of the other things that we didn't mention up front was we wrote the MVP grant and we got state funding. It wasn't quite enough to fund the whole project, so I wrote a second grant. Plympton needed to put up match money for the MVP grant. So I wrote a grant to the Taunton River Stewardship Council, and they were thrilled because they had never done a project in all these years. They've had funding for the last 10 years. They'd never had a request from the Winnetuxet or this part of the world. So they funded the match for the town of Plympton. So this study is costing the town of Plympton nothing. They put up the match for the state grant. And that's why at the bottom, you'll see that this project is funded by the Taunton River Stewardship Council and the EOEA Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. So it's a wonderful opportunity. We're excited to work with you. And I think there's going to be great things that come out of this. And that's where we are right now. So Karen, if you want to put the agenda back up. All right, anybody have any questions on that?
Jump
Comments?
in. Guys, thoughts?
Does everybody like the idea where it's going? I mean, do you feel like we've kind of captured what you'd like as a town?
Some of you, I think, are on mute. Are you, I think Dave and Rick, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
You know, something that I'd like to hear Bill talk more about is that, you know, as you pointed out so much of Plympton, about a Plympton, third of Plympton's in agricultural land. And you're talking about soils and, you know, and we're thinking about a lot of the forest elements are also sometimes, you know, involved in cranberry bog ownership. And the whole future of the cranberry industry is, of course, great concern to us as a town, as the culture, as well as to be protecting that industry. What role can we carve out to make sure that we're talking to the cranberry growers, especially as the sort of caretakers of one of the biggest elements of our soils and our water? And how has that played out in other towns in terms of working with those representatives?
Who are you asking, Linda? Rick or?
Well, I was wondering, Rick, if you had thoughts. Yeah, I don't know what Bill's done, and
yeah,
what have you heard, Rick, through any agricultural connections about concerns that people are having with their growers, especially cranberry growers or big farmers or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from you guys first. We can do this under the what's going on out there, which might always my big question. What's going on out there? So yeah, Dave, if you got some comments, or Rick, that's fine.
Well, we can see if we can pull Brian Wick in. He's, you know, the biggest cranberry connection in town. Not a grower, but being.
I've actually worked with Brian on a couple of projects. Nitrogen, we're doing a nitrogen study on the Wareham River right now, and I did a workshop with Alex Hackman and Avi Monroy in Lakeville in fact, it was last year, for cranberry bog restoration. and we highlighted a few of the projects there, and there were a number of growers there, and it was a great session. And Alex and Avi have already committed to come back in town and do a session, a supplemental session, along with what Sarah Burns is going to be doing with the Nature Conservancy when she talks about nature-based solutions. That's going to be part of that session as well. So, Rick, if you think that'd be good to get Alex in here and talk to some of the growers, that'd be fabulous. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, this year, the highlight with, water wars, where they didn't have any water because it was dry. So storage and retention is definitely a big issue for them. So I'm sure we could find some interest from them.
Great.
Yeah.
How about you, Dave? You had something to say before.
Well, I took some notes on the bylaw impacts that we may review with the bylaw review committee, and I'll get with Alan on that. Well, I had a concern. It's kind of general, and not being too familiar with what you guys do. I am now. It seems that your work and studies are all with water above ground. Where do we go for the watershed or the water table? I guess we're split here. The aquifers are split in Plympton.
Yeah.
One east and one west, and someone can help me with this. I think one is the Taunton end and one's on the east side. Those are as important, I think, as what we're doing above ground or what you guys are helping us with above ground, don't you?
No, we're going to be looking below ground too.
Oh, okay.
This was part of the thing, because we're going to be looking at future potential water supply, and water was a big part of it. We're going to be looking at the surface waters as far as what the state has mapped as far as, critical habitat resilience blocks. That's why the wetlands, waterways, things like that were in there. But like I said, I'm really cognizant of what Peter Newton had already done for the town in kind of telling you where the best groundwater resources were currently and what we can do to help preserve groundwater resources. That's why when we look at soils, I really wanted to make that point about infiltration, and retaining healthy soils that function properly to help, and obviously going to help retain groundwater and that ecosystem that exists under the soil as well. So we'll be looking at that stuff too. And we have folks on the team, the whole Resilient Taunton Watershed Network. We have engineers, we have the DEP, we have a bunch of folks that we can go to get supplemental information as far as the study goes. But absolutely, and that's a great point. You don't want to forget anything that's important to the town, because those are things you brought up in your open space plan as well as your MVP plan.
Yeah, that's right, Dave. I think it was probably because both Bill and I are used to just thinking about the groundwater being there. But as you remember, the number one response from the residents this year to the open space plan's priorities was save our water, protect the groundwater, save the water resources, save their drinking water. It's become the number one priority in the town. So
Yes,
the groundwater is a huge thing. And we did talk a lot to Peter Newton about that. And Bill, absolutely, this is absolutely incorporated into this project. It's a huge part of it, because Peter Newton recommended, he said, on this part of town, it really wouldn't be effective to try to put in 1 or 2 community wells, as he puts them. The whole area is so rich in groundwater resources, and it's such a big impact on everything else Bill was talking about, that we really need to look at how to preserve the system and not have it cut up.
Yeah, you're right, Linda. Preserving that ecosystem and the way it functions is going to be really critical in keeping your groundwater resources healthy. Absolutely.
So this is Mark Russo. Two or three observations, a little bit scattershot, but Bill, number one, I'm so impressed with all the work you're going to do, but the degree to which you're stressing that we, the people in town, will be directly involved in making the decisions as well. And it's a beautiful collaboration. So thank you for that process. And then number two, it's a slightly different way to organize our thoughts, but certainly in some of your bullet points, we're concerned about the health and quality of life and protecting land and water. And a different way to organize that a little bit is an aspiration of many of us that we continue to work on creating a greenway, a green corridor that goes all the way across Plympton for that matter, all the way across the South Shore. So this work obviously is another piece in that. And then just the third thing, I was dealing with a local land trust today, and we were talking about our emphasis on trails through woods and preserving land that way. And we were talking about fundraising and also other ways to get people involved, and the degree to which we hadn't fully taken advantage of those people that are a little less land-based, but more boat-based and water-based. And so it brought forth, again, not only greenways that we're working on, but waterways that are accessible to people, and that contribute not only to their health and quality of life, but protect the land and water.
Right, and that's a great point, Mark. And one of the things that we'll be looking at here too is where this swath of land that's in Plympton along the Winnetuxet actually comes out into Halifax. The Wildlands Trust owns land up there on the opposite side of the Taunton River in Bridgewater, which you might have seen today. And we're trying to get people down to the river more, access the river for canoe and kayak. I know Department of Fish and Game has been looking at trying to reestablish some access points in Halifax off of there. You know, the thing about the corridor and the land and the accessibility for people is the fact that when you have that intact corridor, it does provide the recreational opportunities that you're talking about, and those are really key. You want people to know that the land is protected, but it's not off limits. That's part of the quality of life thing. You can have a beautifully protected portion of land that provides great opportunity, health, environmental equity. It's something that everybody can use, you know, and it works well for everyone. And one of the things too that the Taunton River Stewardship Council was looking at in all of this is the fact that the Winnetuxet River watershed, the part that we're going to be looking at, like I said, goes into Carver, but also goes into Middleborough and Halifax. And Middleborough and Halifax both have representatives on the Stewardship Council. So they're looking at what we do here and how we do it to maybe carry over the same types of practices into Middleborough and Halifax. And that way the three towns can work together to preserve the entirety of that land, which would be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Punk.
Bill, I have a question. How many towns near us are working on a similar MVP grant? Do you know?
We're working also with the Assawamsett Ponds, Lakeville, Middleborough, Rochester, Freetown, Taunton, and New Bedford. But they're looking at a comprehensive watershed plan right now, watershed management plan, where they have the Assawamsett Ponds, which is the largest natural reservoir in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They're looking for long-term protection strategies, management strategies that incorporate everything: fisheries, stormwater, flooding, land management, obviously water supply and water supply regulation, the health of the Nemasket River flowing out of it for the herring fishery. So it's huge. But as far as the stuff that we're doing with other towns, this is unique. This was a unique opportunity for us. Yeah,
I was just wondering. Yeah, I was just wondering if we could like learn from other towns as if they're ahead of us in this process, that we can take information from them to help us move along.
Actually, the Nemasket River study would probably provide some similar information as far as a corridor study goes. They're looking at improvements in the Nemasket River corridor. And some of the same types of things, land preservation, obviously vegetative preservation, nature-based solutions, wetlands restoration opportunities. Cranberry is going to be involved in there. So there could be some trade-off there. And like I said, some of the people that are on that are also part of the Taunton River Stewardship Council as well. People like Trish Cassidy, who's the conservation agent in Middleborough. You know, people like that may be sitting in on this. Bill Hinckley from Halifax.
Trisha's a great person.
Yeah, so we could get some good people sitting in and get an exchange of information there. Plus, you have some of the consultants that are working on that. We have the same type of team put together. It's from the Resilient Taunton Watershed Network.
Mm.
And we could easily do an exchange of information, maybe even bring them in, to supplement what we're doing here.
Yeah, no, it just seems that, we don't need to invent the wheel if somebody already else has, We
Right.
can take what they've learned and possibly give them information and help the entire region.
Yep, absolutely. And I think one of the great things too here is you have innovators, people who've actually created these programs like Mass Audubon with the bylaw review, Eric Wahlberg with the green infrastructure mapping, that it went so well that Mass Audubon actually picked up the basic premise of it and did it statewide. And the state loves it. So, but you got the guy who put it together working with you on your team, and he's familiar with your town. So that's going to be fabulous. I think a lot of people will end up being able to learn from you by the time it's over.
Right. Good.
And I think when we get down to the more specifics of bylaws, months from now, just like we're beginning to do for the natural resources bylaw, anything we can learn from other model bylaws that people have tried, when they had to present it in town or figure out what worked better to adapt their bylaws to be, more relevant to these kinds of goals, that would be a wonderful discussion, especially for rural towns, for us to talk to other rural towns that are small.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the stuff, Linda, that we've learned in Freetown, Dighton, and Berkeley would definitely be applicable here. And again, you got Danica Williams who's going to be here going through the, the system, the Mass Audubon system with you. And I'm sure she's got some great examples and case studies, even from around the Commonwealth. Mass Audubon's program, this is taken off too. They did the bylaw review a few years ago, and they've had so much demand for it that instead of going out and doing it for everybody, they're actually teaching the people in the towns and the boards how to do it now.
That's great. That's really good. It's an incredible package, isn't it, group?
Yes.
It sure is. It's amazing.
We get every parts of the sort of ecosystem, and we get them looking at how to apply to the economic interest and the social interest and conservation. It's an incredible package for us to be able to get, and we never could have done it as our, little town. So it's really wonderful.
It's a tribute to you. You guys asked. I wouldn't be here unless you asked me to. Really, you took the initiative to ask first, your group. So that's why I'm so impressed with the steering committee and how you've all stuck to it, and the documents that you put together, and the fact that, Linda, you did come out and ask, and just, I stopped by town hall for a conversation, and this is what it led to. She said, come by and talk for a few minutes. And I said, sure, no problem.
Not gonna do that again, are you?
I love this. I could do this all the time. This is great.
No, it's really amazing. So what else now do we have to think about?
We have to figure out a meeting schedule. What would work best for you guys? Now, I know not everybody's here tonight, but this is the other thing, working with a town and planning like you're in a town, I don't want to disrupt regular board meetings, regular committee meetings, but I want to be able to accommodate all of you, or as many of you as possible. So, you don't have to decide right tonight, but think about, a day and a time, and we're probably going to have to be doing it in the Zoomiverse, for the immediate future, that would work for all of you to have steering committee meetings. Like I said, I'd like to get together once a month to talk about, this is what we're doing during the month. This is the presentation that's going to occur. These are the people we're bringing in. This is how we'd like to do it. I've already got some sample press releases I've put together, stuff for the newspapers, the whole bit, and stuff we can put up online.
Wow.
But I'm not going to break any of that until we decide what we want to do, how we want to do it, and when we're going to meet, because I will run everything by you before we put it out.
Again, it's just amazing. Now you have tentatively scheduled, is it Manomet for the end of January?
Yes, Manomet's going to lead us off with the whole idea of green infrastructure, because once they tell us about green infrastructure and what's out there on the ground, it'll dovetail into everything. It's going to be just like the presentation tonight. Everything else just follows it.
And that would be open to the public?
Absolutely. We want the public there.
Right. So you're suggesting that we might need a steering committee meeting between now and then, just to put out press releases or something, or how does this work in your mind?
Probably to go over what we're going to do the night that we're going to do it, and how we want to engage the public. Besides a press release, maybe committee members will go out to people that they know and say, this is something you should see. and also run the program by you to make sure that, you know, we're hitting everything that you want. I mean, I have complete faith in Eric and Neil to come out and, you know, just kill the thing. I mean, it'll be a great presentation. But if there are things that, and this is the simple truths and profound clues part, you may say, hey, that's great, but could you make sure you cover this?
Right.
This
right.
is why the steering committee is so important.
So when are they scheduled for late January, or what kind of time do we have to sort of?
Right now, actually, I'm talking to Eric tomorrow. So we'll figure all that out, and we can figure out again a time that would be good for you. Let's think about a steering committee time and maybe a time that would be good to have the presentations on a regular basis. Like if we know that every month, the third Thursday of every month, nobody's doing anything else in Plympton. We're not going to interfere with anybody. We're not going to, people aren't going to be conflicted saying, I have to go to a board meeting, I can't go to the presentation. You know, we'll try to make it as accessible as possible.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, because I think that sounds like a great way to have it on a planned schedule would be good.
Yeah.
And then we have almost a planned schedule for the steering committee to meet 2 weeks or more ahead of time to know that we're hitting the key questions and supporting the publicity. That sounds like a good thing to be getting nailed down. So
yeah, the speakers really appreciate it too. That way, if we can nail it down, even the people who are going to be like 3 or 4 months out, I can send it to them. And like I said, hey, the third Thursday of April, you're on, 7 o'clock at night, you got the gig, here we go.
Right.
That gives us good time to plan it out too.
Something, I don't know who could do this for us, but if we could, well, I look at poor Brian, I pick up, he's Mr. Excel sheet, though. He's so good at Excel sheets. If we had everyone send Brian the standard dates, or where can we get our standard dates? Because we have 11 committees represented here.
Yeah.
And so we would really, it would be good to put together the standard dates that are already taken up, so that we can, or any other special dates that have been marked, so that we can work around those. So does it make sense to, I don't know, Brian, I don't know how to get the standard dates because I don't know if they're dependable on the way they're posted right now on the website. Could all of you just send for the committees you belong to? Would you send those standard dates like Tuesdays and Thursdays, if we know what, to Brian?
Is there any committee that's represented tonight that meets on Thursday? Thursday used to be kind of an off night.
CPC.
Well, that's for bylaw review committee. We meet
Right.
almost last 4 years, every Tuesday and every first and third Thursday
Right.
of the month, and that's been very consistent.
Yeah, and we've bumped into that on open space. We're usually Tuesdays, I think.
Thursday, we've been Thursday.
Oh, we're Thursday. You
Yeah.
can tell where my.
We're
the opposite Thursday of
Yeah, we're,
because of Alan. Yeah.
we're the second Thursday. So this is where if we could get things to Brian, we can start seeing where the gaps are.
Yeah, I'll compile a spreadsheet.
Yeah, we'll do a bylaw. We'll do a spreadsheet of when the standard meetings are real quick.
But the presentation could happen like during the bylaw review meeting would be a good time to have all bylaw review there for the presentation.
Yeah, we have, yes.
And that, yeah, actually that is a great idea, because something like that where I know the first presentation that Danica does when she introduces the program on bylaw review and how to do it, this is the system, this is what you do, this is how you do it. And then the second one, she's actually going to do 2 presentations. The second one, she wants to sit down and actually go over a bylaw, do an example with you and walk you through it. Like I said, do the okay, better, and best formats of it and walk you through to see how you do it. So yeah, the bylaw, different committees might be able to host these presentations too, depending on applicability when you meet. So
At our meeting.
bylaw review could host the Mass Audubon presentations. Open space might want to host, maybe Eric or something like that, or the Nature Conservancy, or me and Helen doing soils, or the AgCom might want to host something, something like that.
Yeah, we've done that several times for bylaw. Works good.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, like I said, whatever works for you. You guys are driving the bus. So if that works good and prevents conflicts and allows you to basically be wearing 2 hats at the same time on a given night.
And it would be
then
nice.
that's best of all worlds.
The planning board has 5 good people on it who are already busy. But again, if it works out that they would be able to, they usually meet on Monday nights, I think it is, maybe If we can get them involved, especially as it goes along towards the bylaw end of things, that'll be really helpful. So, well, why don't we, for the next, in the next week, if we can Brian, get that nailed down for all the committees that are represented here. And then maybe we can find a time to get back with Bill, probably mid-January at the latest, right? Just to talk, because we're going to have the forest thing by the end of January, right, Bill? I mean, that's sort of a done deal.
Right.
So let's say if we tentatively did it the fourth Thursday of January, because nobody's meeting then. Nobody meets on the fourth Thursdays, I don't think. We can talk to you maybe no later than mid-January, so we can talk about reaching out, for press and stuff like that and getting networks going. Does that make sense?
Sure. And what I can do too is I'll send around a memo to everybody to break down. Well, you've probably seen what the workshops are. If you guys have the grant applications, you'll see what the different breakouts are. And maybe look at it and see which one of your committees might be interested in hosting
That's good. That's
a
really
workshop. Do it that way. And that way you might be able to say, like I said, I'll take March, I'll take Audubon, and I'll take May, and I'll take Serpent and Soils, and I'll take February. I'll take January and, Management.
good. That'd be great. Yeah, you'll have to remind me some other time. I'll find that in the application somewhere. Where was the workshop breakouts?
Yep, I can send it to you. I'll send it around. And that way I'll put in, does anybody want to host a workshop? And then we can do it that way. And the ones that don't get picked up, we can put on a night where we don't run into anybody else.
Perfect. I think that'd be great. That'd be great. Good.
All right. And Brian, this might save you some heartburn and indigestion too.
So, all right. Well, I mean, it's going to be a fabulous 6 months or so. These are all done by the end of June, Bill, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So this is a very intense 6 months, but we come out with a lot of new ideas and things to think about, and maybe a new grant application. When would that go in? I mean, don't the grant applications tend to be due in spring?
Yeah, there's a couple of different rounds though, so we can figure it out. And one of the best things is, like I said, our MVP regional coordinator, Courtney Rocher, she's going to be invited to all the meetings too.
Good.
She's part of our team.
Good.
So we can coordinate things with her, and we can get some sage advice from her as to when we should start thinking about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it.
Perfect. Yeah, so it's going to be a fabulous 6 months, and it will be exciting to, figure out how we can make the most of it. And there's MPP money for next year, but we might be able to start identifying other related monies.
Oh, yeah.
That are good for, whether it be agriculture or land acquisition or, bylaw stuff, there'll be other sources of funds perhaps out there that we could tap as well as we prioritize.
Absolutely. And there's going to be, the Taunton River Stewardship Council has more funding available as well. And like I said, you're a priority tributary, so we'll keep that in the back of our minds too.
So, yeah, so it's a great opportunity for Plympton to really try to grab the golden ring here and try to shape our future a bit.
Well, you guys have been working hard. It's wonderful to be able to do this.
It's a very exciting.
I just have one thing, Linda, or sort of one of the chronic issues I think we have in Plympton is a lack of ability to let people in town know about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
We have a newspaper, the circulation is very minimal. So I just think and that whatever the next meeting is, we ought to focus on.
Yeah.
I mean, if the first event is the end of the month, if we wait 2 more weeks.
Right.
To come up with a plan of how is one person going to coordinate that? Is somebody going to put stuff out on Facebook? How are we going to actually do outreach? This is such an interesting and kind of exciting process. Some of those of us with gray hair that have been on committees for 40 years would love to bring some of the new people in town in. I think this is the kind of thing that might draw them if we can figure out how to let people know about it. So it's just.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was right as we've been setting this up. I'm sitting here thinking, how are we going to get out to the broader groups that don't seem to tap? It's tough. And I don't know if Facebook's the right, might supplement it, but there got to be other networks of people who we have to reach, because, I don't know how to do it. So yeah, that's very important. That's key.
All right, we'll figure out the best way to get it out there and, get out through committees, maybe go through the Old Colony planning as well, get the local media, Facebook, whatever, constant contact, whatever you guys usually use. We'll get it out there to whoever you want. We do have a media plan in there. So it's whatever is most effective for you folks, whatever you feel would be most effective, knowing the people in your town as well as you do. So
I don't think we figured it out how to be effective yet.
Yeah, that's hard.
It's an ongoing problem.
But it's a good, maybe this opportunity gives us a new way to take a slice at it. As Susan said, with a lot of younger people who have moved into town the last 10 or 15 years. And when we had to do some fundraising, to buy this new land, a year and a half ago, we had a lot of people come to a party at Rick's. That were a lot of new faces in their 30s and 40s that you don't see sitting on committees. Now they're busy. I mean, they're working and, they're at that stage of life that has 17 things going on at once. But if we can get them involved and at least coming to some of these presentations by Zoom and starting to be involved that way, that would be I think it's a real opportunity to engage them in the town.
absolutely.
So,
Yep.
so all of you, let's all be thinking about that too, among ourselves if there's way. I don't know. I think we should just send something to everybody in town. I don't know. Well,
And wide mailing.
it's only 800 houses. It's not that big.
Yeah, and if you have the schedule, once we have the schedule of when things are, if we could, something that explained it and that here's the schedule, here, please.
Right.
I actually was thinking about that. I don't know any other way that you do outreach, especially in a pandemic. It's not like you can have a party at Rick's, which is the way to get stuff out in Plympton, but anyway.
I don't know. Well, let's think about maybe a snazzy flyer to every house in town and a Zoom address and a web address to say, hey, neat things happening here. This is for town. Show up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's great. I've actually put together a draft press release, and we might be able to turn that into a snazzier flyer if you guys want. I can run that by you too.
Great. Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, let's do that.
All right, cool.
Okay, we'll break the ice on this. We've been wanting to do this anyhow, so let's get at it. Good.
All right.
Well, thank you, Bill. This is thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Good job.
Very
Thanks for
excited.
making the time. And I truly look forward to working with you, and so does my team. We're all really excited to be doing this.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
We'll be talking to you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Safe, happy, and healthy new year. It's got to be better in 2021, right?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks again.
Bye.
See you later, Bill.
Hey, folks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Night.
Right.
Oh, wait.